Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. On this episode of the podcast, we will be talking about the captains of the ship. And no, there'll be no captains of, I don't know. Do you know any famous captains, Tim? I don't know. The guy from the Titanic. He's kind of more infamous than
Jack Sparrow. That's a
Jack
famous
Sparrow.
captain.
There you go. Yeah, Captain Kangaroo. I don't know. But as usual, I'm the co-host, Steve Wirt, and I'm joined with by.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Hannon.
And obviously, we'll be going over four different managers of the Pirates, and they were all successful. So we won't go over like Gene Lamont or John Russell or Lloyd McClendon. Sorry, those guys didn't make the cut. But we go over four guys that are very successful in their tenure with the Pirates. Two of them won World Series, and two of them didn't. But they all had different ways of handling their rosters, and it's a long time. So I mean, it runs from probably 1950 to 2018. So people change, times change, baseball probably changed. So without further ado, we will jump right in, and I guess we'll just run this kind of chronologically here. First up was a one Danny Murtaugh. And he was born in Chester, Pennsylvania, and he actually played second base for the Pirates from 1948 to 1951. He was a career 254 hitter. He also played for the Phillies and Boston Braves. So, and he became the Pirates manager for the first time. And he has kind of a weird run. Like he's like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, Billy Martin, how he had like four different like stints with the Yankees. Like Danny Murtaugh, kind of like the same thing happens with him, but it's not. It's not because like he was just like a really angry person and just kept getting himself fired. He had some health problems, and that's probably what really affected his career in more than one way than just not managing the whole time. So in his first full season in 1958, he led the Pirates to a surprise second place finish in the National League, and this is back when they just had two to no, actually they just had one. They were just the National League. We talked about that in the 1960 World Series episode, but he went on to hold the Pirates job for part of 15 seasons after that 1958, from 57 to 64. And 70 to 71 and 73 to 76 in a brief time in 1967. Is probably his biggest, one of the biggest things he did was he was the manager of the 1960 World Series team that beat the Yankees. And we covered that in another podcast. His managing of the pitching in the ninth inning, I think, was superb. He did the best he had. He really was. He wasn't like, if you like the other manager, Casey, was it Casey Stengel? Yes, I think it was for the Yankees. Gets a lot more credit, and I think Casey Stengel's in the Hall of Fame even. But it's just he doesn't get a lot of credit for that ninth inning, I think, and I don't know. It seems to be kind of he's overlooked. I think he is, there's a lot of reasons for that, and we'll get into that. But then he had only won over 500 seasons after the 1960 World Series. If you remember in the 1960 World Series, the Yankees outscored the Pirates 55 to 27 because every game the Yankees won, they blew the Pirates out. But the Pirates won the series because they won the other games that were close. So after the win, his quote was, after the series was over, he said, "It's not the number of runs you make, it's the number of games you win. It was just typical of my ball club, a fighting ball club all the way." So kind of, stating the obvious there. You can lose every game 100-0, but if you win the ones you need to, doesn't really matter. Scoring all those runs in those other games really doesn't give you an extra win in the win column. Um, he did step down as manager in 1964 before his 47th birthday. He was rumored to be having heart trouble, but then he came back in 1960. What was that? What did I say? 1970, and they won the NL East again in 70. So as soon as he comes back, but the Pirates, I think he realized the Pirates had some talented players, namely Roberto Clemente and Willie Stargell, and some Steve Blass, some really good players. But they lost to Cincinnati that year in 70. And then in 71, that's another World Series that we really haven't covered. They beat a team, the Orioles, that had 4 20-game winners. And those, can you name those 4 20-game winners, Tim?
Jim Palmer.
That's about all I could probably.
That's about
Jim Palmer, and Jim Palmer.
Yeah.
It was Dave McNally, Quellar. Well, there's a way you're supposed to pronounce the name, and Pat Dobson.
Yeah, I definitely would not have gotten that.
Yeah. And they were actually down 2-0 early in that series, but they had a memorable comeback and they forced the Game 7. And if you watch the Game 7, it really is the Steve Blass and Roberto Clemente show. It's kind of the opposite of what he did in the 60 World Series, where he just, he had to really juggle his starting rotation. He shows some patience and just sticks with Steve Blass for a full 9 innings. And Clemente hits a couple home runs, scores a couple runs, and they win. The Pirates win 2-0 and win a World Series in 1971. Something else he did that was interesting was he fielded the first all African American lineup. He was the first manager they know of. And the Pirates in that game, to their credit, did beat the Phillies 10-7. The lineup. Can you name any members of the lineup of that 71 team? The 71 team, Tim.
The one that the all black lineup.
Yeah.
Stargell, Clemente, Sanguillen, Rennie Stennett, maybe.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, now it gets cut.
Doc Ellis.
Yeah.
Pitching.
Obviously. I don't think he was high at the time.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
That's about all I can get to.
Yeah. Did you name Al Oliver?
Al Oliver. No, I did not.
Dave Cash and Jackie Hernandez. Some of those guys. Gene Kleins. I've never heard of some of those guys really, but obviously Manny Sanguillen, Stargell, Clemente, Doc Ellis. Those are more guys we've heard of, but just to show the type of person that and how much Danny Murtaugh thought or cared about this was. They asked him about the lineup, obviously, and he said, "You know what? I knew we had 9 Pirates." So I mean, you gotta love it. The guy just was like, he's gonna put the best team out there. And he said, when it comes to making out the lineup, I'm colorblind, and my athletes know it. They don't know it because I told them, but they know it because they're familiar with the way I operate. And that's probably Danny Murtaugh, the best way to conduct yourself in that situation, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. Words, actions are greater than words. That's a great way to go about your business.
Yeah, as opposed to the way people are now. I don't know. That's that older generation too. He's definitely a generation that's not around anymore. Because he's even really older than the World War II generation. And that's just how those generations were. It was more about what you did than what you talked. Seems like nowadays it's more about how much you talk than what you actually accomplish.
Well, yeah, I mean, now there's social media, there's branding, there's image. People are very image conscious, that kind of stuff. Somebody like him, he wasn't worried about virtue signaling or anything like that. He just like you said, he was just like, well, these are the nine best players, so I'm going to put them in. And, he wasn't, I don't, it doubt very doubtful that he was realizing he was making history. He just was like, these are the nine best players I have. I'm going to play them.
Yeah, so unfortunately, once again, his heart trouble gets the better of him, and in '73, the Pirates are struggling 67 to 69. I think this is for real. This isn't like Urban Meyer heart trouble, like, oh my God, they're gonna fire me. Because every time he just leaves and goes to like the front office, and the team never really fires him. They keep him around. He never really left the Pirates. He just would go to a front office position because I guess his health, and back then they didn't have, obviously the modern medicine that they have now that maybe would have helped them, or probably like smoking and eating a really bad diet didn't help Danny Martell there's case. But he did come back, and he actually picked his successor that time, Bill Verdon, and then in I think later in the '70s, Bill Verdon gets fired, unfortunately. Bill Verdon would go on to manage the Yankees, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So he got fired from Steinbrenner, fired him too. But I met Bill Verdon. He's a very nice guy. I think he coached on the Pirates in the '80s and '90s too. He had to, because that's when I met him. I mean, obviously, I was not meeting him in 1974 before I was born, but
He just passed away recently. I want to say the last 2 or 3 years.
yeah, yeah. So, and a great ball player too.
Hmm.
Gordon was a very good ball player. I think he was on the '60 team.
He
Yeah,
was, yeah.
yeah,
Because we had talked about in a previous episode, we talked about amazingly, how many of those guys from that 60 team are still with us. And I think Bill Verdon might have been one of those guys when we did that episode talking about it until he passed away.
yeah. And so Murtaugh stayed through the '76 season. They actually won titles in the NL East, which, still that's just the NL East and West. There's no divisions in '74 and '75, but they fell to the Dodgers and the Reds in those years. The Reds were the Pirates just for years could not get past the Reds, other than the Dodgers that one year. But it seemed like every year they lost to the Reds. And after a second place, and they had a good team. It just, the Reds were really good in the '70s. And I'm not sure. No, that was before Fernando Mania, because that was in the '80s with the
Hmm.
Dodgers. So after a second place finish in '76, Murtaugh and Brown, that was the general manager, announced their retirements during the final week of the season, and as in December of 1976, after he kind of like did like a Bear Bryant. He was only retired for 2 months, and he had a stroke and passed away.
Mm.
And he was 59 years old. I hate to say only 59 years old. I
That
think
is,
as you get older, it seems that it's not. As I get closer to 59 years old, Tim, it doesn't seem as old, does it? As when
it's
you were 20. Yeah, it's like, oh man, that guy's 50. He's really old. And now it's like, it's only 50. Yeah,
yeah, that's still way too young, 59. And like you said, different time, different lifestyle choices.
yeah,
You talked about like that older generation. There's like the pros and cons, right? Like some of the ways they handle things were a lot better than the ways we handle things, but maybe the lifestyle kinds of choices that they made were a little more harmful. Although we still tend to do that today. But
yeah.
yeah, it seems like, gosh, only 59. He had such a long career.
Yeah, 15 years with the Pirates. Yeah, I mean, and like it wasn't like he ever got fired and came back. It wasn't like Billy Martin, where it's like, oh, I fired him, comes back, fired him, came back. No, he would just go up to the front office or scouting and do that, and then kind of come back and help the team out and manage them again. Danny Murtaugh is not in the World Series. Can you believe it, Tim?
In the Hall of Fame, you mean?
Did I say World Series? Yes. I meant Hall of Fame. He was in the World Series. He was not in the Hall of Fame. He is not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, how many managers have won multiple World Series? I'd love to see that stat. Like how
well,
many and
there,
not in
there's
the Hall of
actually,
Fame?
yeah, somebody, I found the website. They actually did an article on they call it the case for and against Danny Martell. And I thought it was interesting. I didn't agree with it everything, but at least I thought they were at least fair, and I can handle fair. If I don't agree with you and you're fair, at least you were fair to him, and I thought they were fair to him. So the Pirates for their tried to make a case for him, and he has two World Series, and he actually has a better winning percentage than Connie Mack, and Connie Mack is the all-time wins leader, just for that. But Connie Mack has like I looked it up, but I think Connie Mack has like 3,000 wins, and Murtaugh only has 1,100.
Yeah, and Connie Mack managed for 50 years, and a lot of those years were financial distress years for the A's, and that's when they were moving from Philadelphia to Kansas City because of
But
said financial distress. So
but didn't he manage the Phillies too, or
no, it was the
it was the
Athletics.
only the A's? Okay,
Hmm.
you would think that since I just went to Philadelphia and saw the Connie Mack statue, so they have a statue to Connie Mack in front of the Philly Stadium. So go figure, with some quote by Connie Mack on it. So. And guess what? Connie Mack is wearing a suit and tie in his statue because he's one of the he managed in a suit and tie. How do you like that?
That's right. No,
Yeah.
actually, fun fact, Steve, we covered it in our you didn't remember they played for Pittsburgh episode.
Yeah.
The only other team Connie Mack managed was the Pittsburgh Pirates. But that
Yeah.
was before he managed the A's. That was in the 1890s, and the Pirates fired him because they're like, this guy sucks.
3,000 wins later.
Right, right.
Yeah, Connie Mack is a legend. I think second is Tony La Russa now. I did look that up. And Tony La Russa's, I think, did he retire from the White Sox again? Is he
Yeah, I think he
yeah.
finally quit just
Yeah.
very recently.
Yeah, Tony La Russa, I mean, been managing since the 80s, so he hasn't quite had 50 years, but he's definitely had 30 or 40. So, the problem is, like I said, Murtaugh only has 1,115 wins. It's more than some other Hall of Fame managers. Some guy named Southworth and Harry Wright. Murtaugh's 540 winning percentage was better than 8 Hall of Famers. Tommy Lasorda, Connie Mack, Bill McKechnie, the other Pirates manager. Casey Stengel, actually better winning percentage than Casey Stengel.
Hmm.
There I answered my own question. Casey Stengel is in the Hall of Fame. 6 Hall of Famers didn't have as many wins as Murtaugh's. 2 World Series. Leo DeRocha, Earl Weaver, Ned Hanlon. Yeah, Wilbert Robertson. I don't know who he is, but I know who Earl Weaver and Leo DeRocha is. Obviously, Earl Weaver, who didn't get one of his World Series, 2 of his World Series because of Danny Murtaugh.
Hmm.
And Leo DeRocha, manager of the Dodgers. So, if you want to know, let's know more about Murtaugh, the person, because, we can argue over his Hall of Fame. But I think the older I get, the more Mario Lemieux is right. Any award that is voted on really doesn't matter. And I think that's what goes on in the Hall of Fame. And a lot of the arguments are he doesn't have a lot of wins because his health, he didn't manage consistently enough. Maybe if he manages through those years, some of the teams in the 50s and the 60s were really that great. And so his losing percentage was like, he didn't win as many games as maybe you would have liked, but let's see. Steve Blass said, I love that man. He was never unprepared. He knew the game inside and out. When any kind of situation came up, he was able to deal with it quietly and effectively. You could never have too many Danny Murtaughs in the Hall of Fame. That was Steve Blass from a Pittsburgh Post-Gazette article in 2009. Bill Verdon, the man who was fired and he replaced, but that was his handpicked successor, so he deserves it. I'm all for it. I wish I could vote. He was the best thing that ever happened to me in baseball. I played for him, and he set me up to manage. Anytime he'd have a chance, he'd tell me why he did something. I thought of him as one of the best in the business. His record would have been better if he had not retired 4 different times because of health problems, but it says a lot that the Pirates kept asking him to come back. That was Gene Alley. he actually now the case against Danny Murtaugh, Chuck Tanner has more wins than him. Um, I don't know who else. Billy Martin has more wins than him. So it's just that's I think that's why they argue. And then like this guy like argued, oh, Bill James came up with this. Bill James came up with sabermetrics or all the Moneyball stuff that has become so in vogue lately, and it's just he comes up with this low. They call it the lowest common denominator argument, and like, oh well, you're just getting the lowest. But at some point, like there are people that are C students and still pass the class. So because you're a C student, you don't deserve to pass the class. I that would be my argument is like they're saying that Murtaugh is a borderline case. Well, borderline cases are always going to be more controversial than Connie Mack. Connie Mack's a shoo-in. Tony La Russa's a shoo-in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Joe Torre's a shoo-in.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I probably could have managed those Yankees teams and won at least one World Series, but I don't know. It's people get too wrapped up in the the statistics, and the problem is that the candidate being champion is near the bottom of those statistical categories. So, like the old saying, lies, damn lies, and statistics. I just and like part of the statistic was wins above expectations. Gee, Tim, I didn't know you could quantify expectations. Like, well, my expectations figured out to be a 3, or and I was expected to be a 7. How do you quantify human emotions? When you figure that out, tell me, because you're going to make $1 billion in the medical field, and it's just sometimes you have to set the number. Like the numbers can point you in the right direction, but sometimes you just have to look at the picture and use common sense. And I understand we have to draw the line somewhere, and borderline cases are always going to be the toughest because you're going to argue for and against. So, because then if you let him in, like, well, what about all those other people? What about Chuck Tanner? What about this person?
Yeah, I was trying to think of a good comp, and the best one I could come up with was Cito Gaston, who was the manager for the Toronto Blue Jays, who also won multiple World Series, and who, the Blue
They
Jays
mentioned him. Yeah, they mentioned him. Yeah,
the Blue Jays were pretty good the whole time he managed them, or were generally competitive the whole time he managed them, but he doesn't have a ton of wins. He doesn't have a bunch of stats, and people don't think of his names when they think of the great managers of his era, like Tommy Lasorda or Tony La Russa or whoever. So, whatever. Like you said, like Mary Lemieux said, awards that people vote on are always going to be flawed by humans. I think Danny Murtaugh's legacy in Pittsburgh is pretty secure, and I always knew who he was, obviously from those Pirate teams, but I think I came to appreciate him more after the episode, Steve, that you did about the 1960 World Series, and folks can go back and listen to that if they want to, because there was just so much chess match kind of stuff happening because it was such a close, especially Game 7, and he really did outmatch Casey Stengel in that World Series, and that was a big reason why the Pirates won. It wasn't just Mazeroski hitting a home run in the bottom of the ninth. To get to that point, Danny Murtaugh did a bunch of stuff that led them there. So,
I mean, all he had to do was manage his way around, Maris, Mantle, and Berra,
right,
with the winning run on base.
Right. So I think, like I said, I think his legacy is secure here in Baseball Hall of Fame. I mean, these are the same people that won't put Roger Clemens in and Barry Bonds in, but or Pete Rose in because XYZ. So that kind of stuff just the Baseball Hall of Fame to me is pointless. Remember a couple of years ago when Ken Griffey Jr. wasn't unanimous?
Yeah, well, somebody did it just because it was a protest vote. I forget why.
Because nobody had been unanimous since like Babe Ruth or something, and he just But it's like that's so stupid. You're not voting for a player that you should vote for because of some reason that has nothing to do with that player's performance. Again, that to me that kind of invalidated the whole process for me. It already had been invalidated with all the other stuff, but to
It's
me the Baseball Hall of Fame is the most useless Hall of Fame. So whatever. I don't care if Danny Murtaugh's not there.
he's still a great. Yeah, it doesn't diminish his career accomplishments at all. And like it's so weird. Like they want to cherry pick. Like, oh, we're all about the numbers now, but then when the numbers point in a different direction, they're not about the numbers
Yeah.
anymore. And it's just it is what it always is. And I I don't know what to say except for lies, damn lies, and statistics, and the Hall of Fame and the Heisman Trophy and the MVP award, and like that's I just don't care about them. I just, there's no like the Heisman Trophy like literally didn't go to Jim Brown, went to Don, what's his name, the Golden Boy from Notre Dame, just because they were a bunch of racists. So they like you said, they invalidate, they take their own reputations and you know what am I trying to say, like get rid of them, like they make their own credibility, they lose credibility because they just don't aren't honest. And I think you could accept, at least in that article with that other guy, like besides the Bill James stuff, which I thought was a little ridiculous, at least I think he makes a fair case, and he did mention Cito Gaston and some of the other people. But Danny Danny Murtaugh, like hopefully, like maybe someday, like the Veterans Committee will, I think he still has a chance in the Veterans Committee, but it just depends on who he's up against. So, moving on to one Charles Tanner or Chuck Tanner. This guy, I called Danny Murtaugh was definitely a manager ahead of his time. With the all the pitching changes and such. This guy was the eternal optimist, and this is the weirdest thing I've heard of. And I don't think we've ever covered this in any of our podcasts. I'm surprised, Tim, like in your fun facts or weird things you didn't know episodes, we've never covered this, or maybe we have. I don't know. Did you know in November of 1976, the Pirates traded Manny Sanguian for Chuck Tanner?
Really?
Yeah, it's the second time in Major League Baseball history that a player has been traded for a coach or a manager. And I can't think of, besides John Gruden, has there been any other in any other sport? Like I can't think of basketball. Has there been? I can't think of any coaches who've been traded in basketball or even hockey. Like that's the four major sports. So hockey, I guess, is kind of a major sport. Yeah, I mean, besides John Gruden going from the Raiders to Tampa Bay, that was part of a trade, right? Or
Yeah, they had to give him
yeah,
draft picks. Yeah.
and that's it. And they got Manny C in the he sent his manager, the guy for the Oakland A's, Chuck Tanner, because he was managing the Oakland A's at the time, and he sent him for Manny Sanguian and $100,000.
Wow.
And the other time that MLB history where a manager was part of a baseball trade was 1960, ironically enough, and Indians manager Joe Gordon and Tigers manager Jimmy Dykes were traded. They actually traded managers for each other. Like, oh, we like it. That's so weird. Like, we like your manager. No, we like your manager. Let's trade. Uh,
Interesting. I did not know that. That is a
yeah,
good fun fact.
yeah, it's weird. Um, some quotes about Chuck Tanner. Goose Gossage, who was a reliever for the Pirates. Unfortunately, my dad still was upset about Goose Gossage not getting traded. Um, Tanner saw Gossage's awesome potential as a late inning reliever. In '77, he acquired Gossage in a trade and moved him to the bullpen because I guess Goose Gossage was a starter and he wasn't very successful as it, and he moved him to the bullpen, and that just totally, you know, that was his quote. Chuck was totally responsible for me being a relief pitcher. They
Hmm.
were instrumental to me early on in my career. So Mike Easler, trust me, Chuck was always known as this nice guy, like kind of, happy go lucky. Have you ever seen interviews? I've seen interviews with him. He's like kind of like I said, the eternal optimist. But Mike Easler had tempered that with this. Trust me, Chuck had the personality and demeanor to deal with it. Nobody messed with Chuck. Chuck's word was gospel. When he said to do something, you did it. If you didn't, you'd be in his office against the wall and he'd tell you, I'm the manager. So not a pushover. And especially with that clubhouse, he had Parker and Stargell. And, I'm sure he had to lay down the law once or twice with some of the guys he had. In 1979 really was his year, the year it all came together. Like I said, they traded for him in 76. They still had a pretty good team when they brought him in because they obviously still had Stargell and Parker. And, they didn't really, the pitching, I think, was what kind of had to come together. So in 79, the family, they started out slow and they weren't having a good season. And then halfway through the 79 series, I guess, or 79 season, the Pirates turned it around. There's a pretty cool, like, little blurb on MLB TV about it, like, with Sister Sledge and everything. If you really want to listen to We Are Family, it's a fun song. So in August, they didn't take over the lead in their side, their division from the Phillies until late in August, and they kind of didn't look back, and they went on the road. They won the NLCS. I think they beat San Francisco, and they went to Baltimore again for the second time, and that was Earl Weaver again. So poor Earl had to put up with the Pirates in Baltimore. We really do have a pretty good rivalry with Baltimore, huh? And they were down 3-1, and they forced the game 7, and they won game 7 on the road in Baltimore. Which, if you've ever watched that game, have you ever watched the replay of that game, Tim?
I don't think so.
I have, and it's fun to watch because Howard Cosell announces it, and Howard Cosell is so rooting for the Orioles the whole time. It's hilarious, and it's fun to watch Howard Cosell be very disappointed. They had pitcher Bert Bylevin, which I think I saw a picture. Didn't we? Was he the guy that likes farts? Yes, I think
Yes, he was the guy that used to wear the T-shirt that said, "I heart to fart."
Okay, well, gastrointestinal health is key. It stars like Bill Madlock, Dave Parker, and Sparky Anderson, a Hall of Fame manager of his own right, said they do everything with abandon because that's the way Tanner wants it. He's an aggressive manager, a manager who doesn't go by the book. That's why Pittsburgh is such an exciting team. I think what he figured out was he has Parker and Stargell, and he just was like, kind of like the whole philosophy was, let's get some guys on base and get them in the scoring position. So like, Stargell and, Parker will bring them home. And that's kind of how they had, Omar Marino. They had a lot of different guys like that. Who was the third base? Was it Garner, Phil Garner?
He
Yeah,
became a
at all.
manager himself later.
Yeah, yeah. So I just it was lumber and lightning is what they used to call it, and it worked out for them. They came back and they won the World Series on the road. Kent DeCalvey got the save. I think Stargell hit a big 3-run homer in the 7th or 8th, and they got some more insurance runs. And that was it. And that would be the last time a team would win a Game 7 on the road. Until when, Tim?
Till the 2009 Penguins.
Yeah, yeah. So it went a few years, and that's in any sport. So good for the Pirates. They kind of made history with that win. That's how hard it was to do back then. I don't know. For some reason, it seems to have gotten easier. So what happened was the 80s happened. And unfortunately, the 80s had this new drug called cocaine, and people really liked it. People named Dave Parker really liked it. And unfortunately, Rod Scurry liked it too, and Dale Berra. and there were just a lot of problems. We went over that whole episode with the was it the people that the two fans that almost ruined baseball in Pittsburgh. So in 1985, the infamous Pittsburgh drug trials showed that there was drug problems. It wasn't just in Pittsburgh, it was across the league, but apparently like everybody came to Pittsburgh for the I feel like I'm like who is it, like Ray Liotta or something, I got my Pittsburgh connection.
Right.
Like all the whole league was saying that like, hey, it's I got my Pittsburgh connection. So for whatever reason, we were the hub of drug dealing in the 80s. And unfortunately, that led to the downfall of Chuck Tanner, which is weird. Like, that quote by, who was that? Mike Easler said that, Chuck Tanner could at times be tough, but it's just, I don't know. Like, if for some reason he just ignored the problem that was going on or didn't notice it, or I don't know. It was like he said, oh, I didn't know who that strange guy in the clubhouse was. And ended up
Yeah.
costing really his job and probably a lot of credibility in baseball. I think he went on to manage the Braves, but he never had success like he did. But the Braves stunk in the 80s. They had who they have at
Dale
Dale
Murphy, and
Murphy.
that
That
was
was
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were just terrible every year.
Yeah. I remember when the Pirates ended up playing the Braves in the NLCS a couple years later. That was so shocking. It would have been
Yeah,
like I
like
can't even think of a good
like
comparison
the
today.
Oakland A's or somebody or
Yeah, just
Kansas
a team
City.
that had
Yeah,
been bad for years. We talked in that episode about Chuck Tanner, how he was a disciplinarian in terms of what you did when you were on the field and your practice habits. But his philosophy was, I'm not going to babysit grown adults. They're got to live their own lives. But then, Steve, you had made the point in that episode, and you just made it now. Okay, fine, but like literally, this stuff was happening in the locker room. Guys were coming
yeah.
into the locker room to trade drugs and all the other stuff, and it's hard to believe he didn't notice that. But again, who knows, right? I mean, if people, if you have a drug habit that's strong enough, you're going to be good at hiding it, good at concealing it, whatever. So, maybe there's a generational gap there too. The other thing I remember about that episode was Harvey Haddix was the pitching coach at the time. Another old school ball player guy, and they were interviewing him about Rod Scurry being up, not being able to sleep for 2 days, and Harvey Haddix is like, oh yeah, I used to ride the trains, and we used to be up all night on the trains, and it just maybe there was a generational gap there of not understanding that this kind of thing could happen. So maybe that was a
I think they
factor too.
didn't. Maybe they thought it was like alcohol and how people just drank a lot.
Or just young people just being young people. And
Yeah,
I don't know. I really don't. But I can see that. I can see that being a thing too. And like you said, cocaine was a very new thing in the 80s.
yeah,
It really was. And so maybe there just wasn't the understanding, and Chuck Tanner. It's just sad that that's the way his time in Pittsburgh ended, because he people were really angry at the Pirates at that in that era, and a lot of people blamed him. And again,
yeah.
maybe rightly so. Uh, but it kind of dampened his legacy.
Yeah, I think it's one thing to like if Dave Parker's in his home doing it. I mean, you can't really control that. But if somebody's in the clubhouse, like, why are you just
Yeah.
letting random people in the clubhouse?
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
no, you can't be in here doing that. Um, some crazy stuff. Um, he did like I said like Sparky Anderson said he really managed outside the box, and I think that suited him well. He pinch hitted left-handed hitting Milner for righty Steve Nicosia, and the guy was 4 for 4. Steve Nicosia was 4 for 4, and the bases were loaded and the score was tied. And so he puts in Milner, and the guy hits a grand slam off of I guess Tug McGraw on the Phillies. So that was pretty cool. Remember, I think I told this one too, where he put Kent DeCalvi in left field against the
Yeah.
Giants, so he could pitch Grant Jackson
Yeah. That
against.
was crazy, that story.
And then yeah, it's funny because he ended up catching the fly ball like to DeCalvi, like they literally hit a fly ball to him to end the game. Yeah, Ken DeCalvy's hilarious when he interviews, like, please don't hit me the ball. And it ends up like going right. He's like, it was an easy one at least. Yeah. But yeah, it just like we said, just I wish he would have been like more diligent for the drug trials. It probably would have been better to better to him. But, so in '85, the Pirates really stunk, and so they hire this guy named Jim Leland, and that's actually you think about it, for Murtaugh to Tanner to Leland, that's three pretty solid managers in a row. And he was hired in 1986, and he managed the Pirates until 1996. And really, after the drug trials, he got the Pirates back to respectability. And he's actually won two Manager of the Year trophies in '90 and '92. His players were Barry Bonds, Jay Bell, Tim Wakefield, Andy Van Slyke, Bobby Bonilla. Three straight seasons of National League Championship baseball. Unfortunately, it didn't progress past that. I'll give him the Reds, but one of those series with the Braves he should have won. Still lives in Pittsburgh. I have a clip. I can't play it because it has a bunch of cussing in it, but we'll post it. I guess Barry Bonds in spring training one year was because he's Barry Bonds and was in a contract dispute and was like hassling Bill Verdon. Yes, Bill Verdon has come up again in our podcast. And Jim Leland got sick of his crap and kind of cussed him out in the only way Jim Leland can. Jim Leland's the best. He smokes in the dugout, and not vape, like full blown. Yeah, he's got to fire up a heater. He really is like a throwback to like him and Danny Murtaugh probably would have got along great.
Probably.
Do you remember him throwing milk on the wall of the dugout?
Yeah.
I couldn't find any video or articles of that. But I do. I just making sure I do remember that. Barry Bonds, the guy who cussed out, and this is after years later. Barry Bonds said, "The best I ever had. We have a great relationship to this day. He just had this vibe that you respected. He simplified things and acted in a way you could understand. I'm almost grateful he cussed me out because it helped us grow so close that nothing could ever separate us."
Yeah, that was amazing to hear Barry Bonds. I've heard that interview too, and Barry Bonds has definitely mellowed out post playing career. That chip that he always carried on his shoulder seems to have lessened a little bit. And for him to reference that huge fight that they had and say, "Yeah, I was completely wrong," and he was right for chewing me out was pretty shocking to hear him say it. That'd be like Antonio Brown 20 years from now being like, I acted like a baby and. Right. Like it would be weird to hear that. So that says a lot about Jim Leland, I think.
Here's another fun Jim Leland story. Rich Donnelly, who is the bullpen coach. One night in Shea Stadium, Leland had Bill Landrum and Bob Kipper warming up and then told Donnelly to have Bob Patterson start throwing as well. And Donner was like, I said, Skip. He says, Skip, we only have two mounds down here. And Leland's like, I don't give a crap. Have one of them throw sideways. So I guess he didn't want Davey Johnson, the coach of the Mets at the time, to know which pitcher he was gonna put in. So he tried to have three guys warm up.
Nice.
He would do stuff like that too. He would put placeholder people on deck. So you wouldn't know, oh, he's not pinch hitting or he's pinch hitting this dude, and then switch him at the last minute. So
he would have made a good NFL coach. Who are we going to start a quarterback this week? We're not going to name our starter until Sunday. You'll never see it coming.
Yeah. So he loved to laugh. Gary Reedus one time, I guess he would take a bathroom break, and I think he was smoking in the bathroom is what he was doing between innings. And Gary Reedus once stuffed a pair of shoes in a St. Louis bathroom stall, preying on Leland's between innings habit. After two unsuccessful trips, Bob Walk said Leland lost it. And Leland says, I don't know who the bleep is in there, but if they're sick, tell them to go the bleep in the clubhouse and get the bleep out of the bathroom. So eventually somebody pulled the shoes out and said, hey, they were messing with you. There's a great clip too of when he was manager in Detroit. He went to the Marlins after the Pirates decided they didn't want to play winning baseball anymore and just wanted to sell the stadium and bobbleheads. And and he goes to the Marlins, wins a World Series there, and he ends up in Detroit with a pretty good team and has a lot of success there. They don't quite win a World Series, but they're pretty good. And he's arguing a call, and I don't know what, like, nothing against God Bless America, but I don't understand why on Sundays in like the eighth inning they sing it at baseball games, but whatever. And so he goes out to argue with the umpire like during this break, and God Bless America starts to play or be sung or whatever. He literally stops arguing with the umpire, puts his hand over his heart, like waits for the song to be over, and then just goes right back to manage like, arguing with the umpire, and he's kicked out. So and there's another clip I guess we'll have to put up on. Yeah, it's hilarious. Jim Leland. There was one time I heard a quote from one of his players. They had a 20-4 loss. I don't know which. I don't know if it was with the Colorado. It might have been when he was short time in Colorado too. He said he was going to call the cops on the team for on the players for impersonating an MLB player.
Nice.
I get it. He's just wild. Yeah.
Yeah, just such a character. His rocking chair. He used to do these post game interviews in like this wooden rocking chair while he was smoking a cigarette. I always felt like that rocking chair should be at like the Heinz History Center on display somewhere
with a pack of Marlboro Reds.
Yeah, with a pack of Marlboro Reds. Steve, you mentioned about how he still lives in the area. There were rumors I think it was last year that he was gonna that the Phillies had fired their manager and they were looking for a manager and he was actually rumored to be somebody they were interested in. And I'm surprised that no one has started the rumor that, could he ever come back to the Pirates? I believe he's 78 or 79 right now.
Yeah,
so I don't see that happening, but boy, it would not be fun.
Yeah. It's just, he's just a wild dude, and it was a lot of fun. I just wish he would have won at least one World Series with that team. That was such a devastating loss in '92, and just the way it went down, and then for the team just not even try and be competitive after that for a long time, and then they kind of faked it for a couple of years, and now they've gone back to like not even trying to be competitive. So. Moving on to the last guy in our podcast here. I guess I don't know, like Clint Hurdle. Does anybody remember? I put the man who returned winning for a short period of time. I think mainly the biggest thing. So Clint Hurdle was he interviewed for both the Pirates and the Mets for their vacant managerial job, and he was actually hired by the Pirates on November 14th, 2010. 6 weeks after the immortal John Russell was fired, who I'm sadly has been overlooked in this podcast of Pirate Manager. And no offense against John Russell. I think he's like a fairly successful like assistant manager somewhere. It's not like his fault. The Pirates won't spend any money.
His record was I don't have it in front of me, and this is a huge exaggeration. But it was
abysmal.
Like it was like 23 and 300 or something like that. It was really bad.
It was Hugh Jackson-esque.
Yeah. It was Hugh Jackson-esque. That's a good comp.
Yeah. So he had, I think he had managed Colorado and taken them to a World Series, which they had lost, unfortunately. Much of the delay, they couldn't hire him for 6 weeks because the Pirates could not interview him until after. I guess he was managing with the Rangers at that point in their World Series run. 2013, he broke the 20-year losing streak. That was probably like one of the bigger things he did. He was definitely the manager for the Cueto game, which I think we actually did a whole podcast just on that game.
We did.
Yeah. So, but then they lost to the Cardinals in the divisional round. They had Garrett Cole. Should they have started Lariano? I remember people saying we should have started Lariano. We were arguing with like other people about that. That first game, I figured we started. Did we have Burnett back then? I think we had AJ.
Well, we started Garrett Cole in Game 5. I remember that. and
Yeah,
that was the big controversy was he was
yeah.
a rookie at that point. So
But he pitched okay. He pitched well.
yeah,
They had that Waka guy who we could not hit. It's just,
yeah. The I'm not. I don't want to spoil what happens after this, but it's a theme of Clint Hurdle's time in Pittsburgh that that he had some good teams. They were just never the best team.
yeah, yeah. 2014, they made the playoffs and lost to the Giants, the infamous Madison Bumgarner
Hmm.
game. Like, and that was another Garrett Cole. He pitched Garrett Cole again. And did Schwarber hit a home run off him? I think Schwarber did. Carl
That
Schwarber.
was 15, but yes,
Yeah.
that was the
And
Cubs.
okay. All right. And then yeah, and it just that loss to the Giants, I wasn't as upset because I thought the Giants were a really good team. And Madison Baumgartner's a really good pitcher. The one that always kind of bothered me was 2015, that loss to the Cubs and that joker of a Arrieta. That guy was on. That guy was on. There's no way that guy wasn't on some sort of steroid. He literally had 6 months of good pitching, and he's not done anything since. And earlier in the season, the Pirates had absolutely lit him up. So if he wasn't doing steroids, he was putting spider tack on the ball. He was cheating in some way because the Cubs suck. And the older I get, the more I dislike the Cubs. I used to never like dislike the Cubs as such, but like I'm not even going to play it because I have the clip of Jungo Gong getting hurt. That killed us because we
Yeah,
lost a big bat.
yeah,
And
that did
then,
hurt.
Joe Madden, oh, that's just good old fashioned baseball. And baseball not giving a crap until like, oh my gosh, somebody from the Mets shortstop got hurt on a dirty slide. Oh, we got to get rid of it. Like,
Right.
why even? Like, I just, and then like our crappy owner does nothing about it. Like nothing about like any. Just, it's a. If we had a better owner, I think we would have won a World Series just for the fact that like not even like the whole spending money thing, like that crap with the sliding and all that, some of these other issues that he just doesn't do anything about because well, I'm getting paid. Like it's just, you could get paid more if your team was competitive. He just doesn't care about winning. But that's another. We've discussed that so many times.
Well, yeah, it's you're spot on with all that stuff. I think Clint Hurdle though. There's I honest to God never thought I'd live to see the day where they'd win 82 games. I just didn't. I thought that was just never going to happen again for them to be over 500. The fact that he did that and the fact that he did it for multiple seasons, uh, you might never see it again.
Well, in 2019, he did get fired. They had some bad seasons. I think his team's underachieved a little bit. Like, especially they should have beat the Cubs. They should at least beat the Cubs in that wild card game. It always seems like they are always in the wild card game. They just needed to win more too during the regular season, and they could have avoided the wild
Right,
card game
right.
and played in the actual series. And where if you lose one game, it's not the end of the world or
Yeah,
the end of at least
that's
the end of your season. Yeah, maybe
no,
not the end of the
that's a good
world.
point too because they always hosted that wild card game too, which meant that they were the first wild card. So then they were,
Yeah.
like you said, to your point, they were very close, but they could never catch St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis just, and especially the pool holes always seem to have their number.
Hmm.
So out of the four people I've discussed, best manager out of the four of them, Tim, I don't know.
Well, I mean, obviously, Murtaugh had the most success,
Yeah, with the
right?
two World Series, Leland, I think Leland, he didn't win a World Series, but he has more wins than any of them. Actually, Leland has 1,796 wins all time and a winning percentage of 506. So Leland has been very successful. Tanner's second in all times win. He has more wins than Murtaugh, and I think Hurdle has more wins than Murtaugh. So
Hmm. Hmm.
that's probably a big reason why Murtaugh isn't in the Hall of Fame. If he wouldn't have managed, if he would have managed those other years, he probably would have had more wins just for the fact that, it's baseball and you're going to at least win like 50, 60 games, even if
Yeah,
his winning percentage would have dipped, but his overall wins would have went higher for sure.
I think one other thing to say about Leland is it cannot be underscored how awful of a situation he stepped into.
Yes.
Go back
Yeah.
and listen to that episode we did called how two fans nearly destroyed the Pirates, because when he came in, they had what I called in that episode the worst season of any sports team in the history of the city, any sports team, and they were about to either leave Pittsburgh or be contracted or something, right? Like they were just done. They weren't even a franchise anymore. So I just Leland deserves a bunch of. I guess Leland I have a fondness for because that's my era of baseball, right? That was the era of baseball that
Mhm.
I loved, and I love those teams. But yeah, I think Murtaugh has the track record of actually winning World Series. I think Tanner, obviously, the '79 World Series is very special, and then Hurdle, like I said, just being able to field a winning team in an era where you had ownership that could have given two bleeps about winning. Uh, all four of those guys have their place in Pirates history. To your point,
And it's nice to do. We don't get to do a lot of Pirates episodes because the Pirates suck. And I just happy to finally do one and put some positive. You know, they do have a very winning history and distinguished history. It's just a shame. Like they could rival the Cardinals if they tried as far as winning. And would you think in the National League are the Cardinals the most successful team?
historically,
Yeah,
yeah,
Dodgers, maybe the Dodgers. I mean, the
Dodgers are up
Dodgers
there.
probably have more World Series wins. No, the Cardinals have more World Series wins, don't they? I think so.
Yeah, the team with the most pennants is the Cardinals, I believe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're just going off of that, but then some teams have existed longer than others and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, I no, I stand correct. The team with the most pennants is the Dodgers, and the Giants are actually second.
Oh wow. Didn't know.
So, it's Dodgers, Giants, Cardinals, Braves, Cubs, and the Pirates are sixth on that or seventh on that list. So,
For even all their ineptitude, they're still.
yeah.
Yeah.
But again, a
Well,
lot of that goes back, years and years and years too. So you have to factor that into the mix. The Arizona Diamondbacks haven't been around as long,
yeah.
right? So you're right though. It's sad. The Pirates have a good history, but it feels like it's like gets further and further away,
Yeah.
every year, and it becomes more and more ancient history. And we'll always celebrate it on this podcast because that's what this podcast is about: Pittsburgh sports history. But when you're a fan of the current team and you see, they did a social media post just this week celebrating Roberto Clemente Day and everything. They had a celebration for that, which is great, and they should honor that kind of stuff. But then at the same time, it makes you think like, okay, it just reminds you that, of all that was once good and that is not today.
Well, staying on the positive, Danny Murtaugh was really good, and and we've had four really good managers, and two of which, well, three of which I mean, I remember going to games and seeing Chuck Tanner there when I was a kid. So three of these guys have happened during our lifespan, Tim. So it's not, not like Fred Clark and Bill
Yeah,
McKechnie.
yeah, that's true. There's been
So
some things to celebrate. You're right.
thank you for tuning in. That wraps it up. If you have any comments, please email us or leave a comment on any of our social media, Twitter, Facebook. Send up a smoke signal. Me and Tim will see it. Join us on any of our podcast services like iTunes, Spotify, blah blah blah. You know what you're looking for. But thank you for tuning in. Word of mouth is always great too, and we'll catch you next time on the next Pittsburgh Sports Memories.